Well, joining us now on the program, Simar Dugal. She's a model, also Sudhir Mishra, filmmaker with us, and my colleague Vikram Thapa, who's been, of course, tracking this story. Thanks all so much for joining us. Simar, first to you, as someone who's sort of familiar with the so-called glamorous business, the glamour business, really, as it were. This is a young, bright girl, really unnecessary, and what a tragic loss. There's very little really to say on that. But are we as a society not taking depression seriously? Because after her death, it emerges that she talked about being a failure, about being perceived as someone who wasn't a success.
Yes, clearly, I think there is a trend here. I see it because I did know Viveka Babaji very closely. She was a friend of mine. I also knew Nafisa Joseph. We had modeled, we had done a number of assignments and a number of tours together. And the last thing you would say about these two girls was that they would be prone to depression, or they were extremely confident, they were go-getters, they were leaders in their field at a very young age. I see the same parallel in Jiah Khan, that they tasted success at a very, very young age. They were very brave in the choices that they made. And this seemed to be a second innings that they didn't seem to be able to take grip of. And I think that it must be depression, it must be something that we have to be made more aware of, clearly.
Right.
This should not be happening as often as it has.
Right, that's of course tragedy. It happens over and over again. It makes headlines, unfortunate headlines over and over again. But are we really learning any lessons? Sudhir Mishra, to you, we see this young, bright actors, actresses, all desperate to make a name for themselves, sort of enamored really in a sense by the glitz and glamour of industries like say the film industry, maybe even modeling, and all of that. But time and time again, we see that their life falls into the same pattern, unable to cope with failure just the same way as they enjoy their successes.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, you can't draw a correlation directly. There's no, this leads to that directly. There's
right.
Individuals, and different individuals react to stress differently.
Fair enough.
The industry may be, a place where glitz and glamour and maybe when you're, failing, then, you're bereft of friends or work, there's a loneliness that grips you. But the industry is equally welcoming of comebacks.
Right.
I mean, it's just a Friday that makes it all come back again. So I mean, it's all sorts of things, I mean, and it's not merely of this, there's a loneliness in a big city.
Right.
And suicides happen, mostly when suicide happens, the person concerned has talked to a few people. You can see signs. It may be that night she was, just in the grip of an emotion and there was nobody to hold her hand.
Right.
It could be one of so many reasons. So, I mean,
right.
all you can do is mourn a tragedy and you wish
right.
it had
So
not
the
happened
idea, of
and
course,
that
not
she's stuck
being,
by
right. The idea, of course, not being to,
that it would have turned around, it would have turned around.
Fair enough. The idea, of course, not being to sort of single out any industry, but, perhaps it's easier in say, a so-called glamorous industry to sort of hide behind a facade, really, or sort of not let people around you come to know of what you're undergoing. But do you believe that this is something that the industry sort of needs to keep in mind, because increasingly this is also a very young industry, lots of youngsters out there wanting to make a name for themselves? And again, I don't mean just films. I don't mean just films.
Believe that the Photoshop. There's a perception. See, what happens in films is there's a larger life portrait of yourself that you see. You don't have to believe that the Photoshopped image is you, And if you trust more in your talent, then it does turn around. And it would have, this is a tragedy, but, she had done good work. Why this girl did what she did is perhaps one will never know now. It's a tough world at times, and you have to understand that, what keeps you going is, what I would always tell young people all the time is that if you come into this place, you have to be able to face rejection.
Right.
That's the first lesson, because anybody can reject your work, anybody can criticize you. You know, your films can fail, you can be alone. There are many compulsions that make people not work with you.
Right.
You know, there are many compulsions of film directors, film producers, you know. So, I mean, you have to understand things from a larger perspective and
Right.
keep going, and one day it turns around. You know, just trust your talent, you know, and it works.
Right.
You know, but, you know, what happened to Jiah may have nothing to do with the film industry. It may be a
Absolutely.
young woman
Right. Fair enough.
depressed because of an individual circumstance.
Fair enough. That, of course, is very possible also. Simran, you know, you mentioned Nafisa Joseph, you also mentioned Viveka Babaji, unfortunate parallels, of course, being drawn. So, making the point, it could have happened to anyone, anywhere, which is, of course, also perhaps very, very valid. It could really be anyone's story.
No, I don't think so. You know, here when I heard about this, about this morning, I feel in hindsight it's easier to say that it'll turn around, it'll come around, but I see a very strong trend here, which I think we need to get up, and we need to sit up at least families of girls who are out there trying to be reaching where they want to reach, who are aspirational in nature. I think their families and their friends need to sit up, and I think we need to notice there is a very strong trend. None of these girls, I told you, they did not appear fragile to me or to anybody else. The facade is rather strong. They come across extremely confident. They seem to know what they're doing, and suddenly you wake up and you hear that they are not there anymore.
Right.
So it's a young life, it's a talented life, and worse than a young life going is one that is gone by its own hand. So when you sit up, it gives me chills to really think that, you know, there was Viveka who was effusive and young and vibrant, and suddenly she was not there anymore. And I think that we need to take notice that even these girls who are out there, they are fragile at the end of the day. And that while they look secure and they look like they are in control, that they're clearly not. And I think I can understand, because it is a very fracturing to your self-esteem when you've actually been there, you've touched the stars, and suddenly you're not even needed, you're not noticed, and yes, clearly people you believe less talented than you are reaching up ahead for whatever reason. And Bollywood doesn't tell you why somebody and you know, when you have those lows at a very young age, like 25, and you feel, oh my God, is it over? I touched it, and is it over? It can be extremely difficult to take care of, and I think we need to notice. I think parents and friends, in hindsight, it's so much easier to say, I wish one had reached out, I wish I was there, and I guess that's
see the signs, like you're saying, see the signs, and not just, of course, in
see
this
the signs,
industry.
you know, and I got up today, and I have to say, I was so upset to see that this keeps happening every couple of years, and this seems to become a trend. It wasn't a trend, it's clearly become a trend.